there's a particular kind of silence that falls over certain conversations. It happens when someone asks where you're from, and you answer with a place name that carries no warmth in your voice. When they follow up with, "Do you miss it?" and you pause, searching for the polite lie before settling on, "Not really." The confusion that crosses their face is always the same, because for them, hometown means roots, means belonging, means the place that shaped you and holds some permanent piece of your heart. But for you, it's just a place you used to live. Maybe you know someone like this. Maybe it's you, that person who left their hometown and never looked back, who feels no pull to return for anything other than obligation, who scrolls past photos of their old streets with complete indifference, while everyone else seems to carry this nostalgic ache for the place they grew up. Most people think not missing your hometown means something is wrong with you, that you're cold, disconnected, ungrateful for your roots, that you've forgotten where you came from, or you're trying to be someone you're not. But psychology tells a far more complex story. For most people who don't miss their hometown, the absence of nostalgia isn't about rejection or ingratitude. It's about the honest recognition that the place never fit, that the person you were there was never who you actually are, that leaving wasn't running away. It was finally running towards something that felt real. The indifference doesn't come from being heartless. It comes from having spent years in a place that never felt like home, surrounded by people who never really saw you, living a version of yourself that was acceptable but never authentic. The lack of longing isn't emptiness, it's relief. Here's the part that makes hometown-proud people uncomfortable. People who don't miss their hometown aren't lacking connection or community or sense of belonging. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the people who feel least attached to their hometown are the ones who understand belonging most deeply, because they know what it feels like when belonging is absent. They're not running from community. They're searching for the real version of it. The version where you don't have to perform or pretend or compress yourself into an acceptable shape. They tried feeling attached for as long as they could. They participated in local traditions, showed up to reunions, maintained friendships with people from high school, posted the expected nostalgic photos on anniversaries of leaving. And every single time, they felt the same hollow disconnection, the performance of nostalgia without the actual feeling of it. And at certain moments, that disconnection becomes impossible to ignore. When you go back for holidays and realize you have nothing in common with the people you grew up with. When someone asks, "Don't you miss it?" and you genuinely search your feelings and find nothing. When you're supposed to feel something about a place closing or a landmark being torn down and all you feel is mild interest, like hearing news about a city you visited once. The psychology around this is more nuanced than it appears, because hometowns are supposed to be formative. The place that shaped your identity, gave you your values, created your foundation. But what happens when your hometown wasn't formative in positive ways? What happens when the shaping felt more like compression? When the values it offered didn't match the values you discovered you actually held? When the foundation it provided was something you had to spend years dismantling to become yourself? Psychologists call this geographic incongruence, the experience of growing up in a place that doesn't match your personality, your values, your way of seeing the world. And while it can create temporary belonging through familiarity, it rarely creates the deep attachment that becomes nostalgia. Because nostalgia requires more than just time spent somewhere. It requires the feeling that the place saw you, accepted you, gave you room to be yourself. And when that's absent, when you spent your formative years feeling like a visitor in your own life, leaving doesn't create longing, it creates exhale, the release of finally not having to pretend anymore. What if not missing your hometown isn't about ingratitude? What if it's about finally being honest about what that place actually was for you? The people who don't miss their hometown are often the ones who are most out of place there. They're not comparing their current life to some idealized past. They're comparing their current freedom to the constraint they felt growing up. And when you've tasted what it feels like to be somewhere that fits, going back to somewhere that never did just feels like putting on clothes 3 sizes too small. Uncomfortable, restrictive, a reminder of a version of yourself you've outgrown. And that lack of attachment wasn't chosen in isolation. It was earned through accumulated experiences of not fitting, of being too different, too ambitious, too quiet, too loud, too something for the narrow acceptable range that place offered. So they're not rejecting their roots out of snobbery. They're acknowledging that those roots never went very deep because the soil was wrong for the kind of person they actually were. The crisis around not missing home often comes not after one moment, but after accumulated realizations. After another visit where you count the hours until you can leave. After another conversation with hometown friends where you realize you're speaking completely different languages now. After catching yourself referring to it as where I grew up instead of home, and realizing the shift in language reflects a shift in reality. That realization isn't freeing initially, it's isolating. Because it means accepting that you don't have what other people seem to have. That automatic sense of belonging to a place. That geographic anchor that grounds their identity. That nostalgic well they can draw from when they need to remember who they are. You don't have that. Your identity isn't tied to coordinates on a map. And while that creates freedom, it also creates a particular kind of loneliness. Research shows that people without hometown attachment often develop what psychologists call flexible identity. Their sense of self isn't location dependent. They don't need to be in a specific place to feel like themselves. Why? Because they learned early that place and self were separate. That who they were didn't depend on where they were. The pattern becomes clear. Not missing hometown creates adaptability. Adaptability creates resilience. But it also creates the ongoing question: if I'm not from anywhere in a meaningful sense, where do I actually belong? Another misunderstood aspect is this. People assume not missing your hometown means you had a terrible childhood. In reality, it often means something more subtle. It means your childhood was fine, but it was never yours. It means you were loved, but not seen. It means you had friends, but never felt known. It means you were safe, but never felt free. The person who doesn't miss their hometown hasn't necessarily rejected their past. They've just recognized that their past was preparation for something else, not the destination itself. And that's completely different psychology than bitterness or resentment. This doesn't happen overnight. It starts early. As children, many adults who don't miss their hometown absorbed certain feelings. Maybe they were always the different one and never understood why that felt like a problem. Maybe they looked around at the options available in that place and felt a quiet panic that this couldn't be all there was. Maybe they consumed books and movies and music from other places and felt more connection to those than to anything in their actual surroundings. Maybe they learned early that the dreams they had didn't fit in the geography they occupied. The specific memories often stay with them. The teacher who told them they'd never make it if they left. The parent who couldn't understand why here wasn't good enough. The friends who saw their ambitions as betrayal rather than growth. The general sense that wanting more or wanting different was somehow an insult to everyone who stayed. These aren't abstract influences. They're formative moments that taught the brain. Belonging here requires becoming smaller, quieter, more like everyone else. And once you learn that lesson, attachment becomes impossible. Because you can't be nostalgic for a place that required you to be less than yourself. When you're 35 and thriving in a city that fits you, you're not just living your current life. You're living it while remembering the version of yourself who felt trapped in your hometown. Who knew there was something else out there but couldn't name it yet? When you go back for weddings or funerals and people ask when you're moving home, you realise they still think of that place as your home. But you don't. Home is where you don't have to explain yourself, and you've never not had to explain yourself there. The past doesn't just inform your present, it makes your present feel like proof. Proof that you were right to leave. Proof that the feeling of wrongness wasn't in your head. Proof that some people are meant for the places they're born and others are meant to find their place. As adults, people without hometown attachment are often carrying a question that never fully resolves. If everyone else has this automatic belonging to a place and I don't, does that mean something is missing in me? The answer they arrive at varies. Some decide yes, something is missing, and they spend years trying to create artificial attachment. Others decide no, nothing's missing. Some people are just built to be mobile rather than rooted, and recognizing that doesn't automatically create peace. Understanding that your lack of hometown nostalgia is normal for your type of person doesn't make family gatherings easier when everyone else is reminiscing and you're just waiting for it to be over. What was once internalized as "this is where I'm from" becomes a permanent source of mild alienation. It creates disconnection, regardless of whether it was ever meant to create connection. That recognition is important. But it doesn't resolve the social awkwardness of being the person who left and doesn't romanticize what they left behind. And that creates an impossible situation. You understand intellectually that not all places fit all people, but socially, the expectation is that you should at least miss it, that you should carry some warmth for the place that raised you. And when you don't, people interpret that as character flaw rather than geographic mismatch. From a psychological standpoint, this is called place identity, or lack thereof. Some people's identity is deeply tied to location. Others' identity is tied to values, experiences, relationships that are portable. And neither is better or worse. They're just different ways of being human. But the culture tends to romanticize the rooted version and pathologize the mobile version. So people without hometown attachment learn to hide it. To perform nostalgia they don't feel. To say "I miss it" when they mean "I'm relieved I left." Here's something rarely acknowledged. People who don't miss their hometown often have incredibly rich current lives. Maybe they've built chosen family that feels more real than biological family ever did. Maybe they've found communities based on shared values rather than shared geography. Maybe they've created belonging that isn't accidental, that isn't just based on being born in the same place, but is intentional, built through genuine connection. The lack of hometown attachment doesn't mean lack of attachment generally. It just means their attachment is to people and purpose, rather than to place. We live in a world that still values roots, that asks, "Where are you from?" as if the answer tells you something fundamental about a person, that treats moving away as brave but staying away as suspicious. Your ancestors probably lived and died within 50 miles of where they were born. You have the option to live anywhere, and having that option means having to choose, which means potentially choosing away from where you started. The internet has made geographic loyalty less necessary. You can maintain relationships across distance. You can build community that isn't location-based. You can create identity that travels with you rather than being tied to coordinates. And your brain is slowly adapting to this reality, even though the cultural scripts haven't caught up yet. And these complexities don't disappear when someone makes peace with being hometown free. Because there's another layer, the guilt. There's a particular shame in being the person who doesn't carry the expected nostalgia. When family members talk about home and mean the place you grew up, and you have to consciously remember, they don't mean what you mean by home. When people romanticize small-town values, and you remember those values feeling suffocating. When you're expected to be grateful, and you are grateful, just not for the reasons they think you should be. Behind the indifference is sometimes hidden relief, so profound it feels almost cruel. Relief that you escaped. Relief that you found something better. Relief that you never have to go back except by choice. And that relief carries guilt because it implies judgment. It implies their beloved hometown wasn't good enough for you, even though it's not about good enough. It's about good for you, and those aren't the same thing. Some people discover that accepting their lack of hometown attachment feels like betrayal initially, but eventually creates freedom. That letting go of "I should miss it" allows presence with "I'm glad I left, and that's okay." Some people restructure their entire understanding of belonging, shifting from place-based to people-based, from geographic to value-based. Some people finally address the guilt, recognizing that loving where you are now doesn't require pretending to long for where you were. Some people just accept that their origin story doesn't include romantic attachment to origins, and that's perfectly fine. Not broken, just different. There's something that shifts when you stop asking, "Why don't I miss it like I'm supposed to?" and start asking, "Who decided I'm supposed to miss it?" The first question assumes something is wrong with you. The second question reveals the assumption that everyone should be nostalgic for their beginnings, that roots are always good even when they're growing in concrete, that leaving is fine, but not preferring having left is somehow wrong. Maybe the place you're from was exactly what you needed it to be. Not the place that kept you, but the place that released you. Not the destination, but the starting point. Maybe not missing it isn't ingratitude. Maybe it's honesty. What if hometown indifference isn't lack? What if it's just clarity about what that place actually was versus what you needed it to be? The people who romanticize their hometowns aren't better. They just got lucky. Lucky that who they are matched where they were. And you can't be nostalgic for a match that never existed. There's no timeline for developing hometown loyalty. No deadline for feeling the pull to return. No age by which you're supposed to suddenly miss it. You're not cold. You're just honest. From a psychological standpoint, this is called authentic attachment versus obligated attachment. Some people genuinely miss their hometown. Others feel they should and perform accordingly. And the second group often experiences relief when they finally admit the truth. They don't miss it. They never will miss it. And that's not wrong, it's just true. But there is one part of hometown indifference that can persist even after self-acceptance. The isolation. Even when you've made peace with not missing it, even when you've stopped feeling guilty about your relief, it can feel lonely to be surrounded by people sharing hometown nostalgia you can't access. The person who can't participate in remember when conversations because those memories don't carry warmth. The person who feels distance when everyone else feels connection. That isolation is real, and it doesn't resolve just because you've done the internal work of accepting your truth, because you're still living in a world that expects geographic loyalty, that treats hometown indifference as character flaw rather than compatibility issue. The psychology of people who don't miss their hometown is not about being cold. It's about the gap between the place you occupied and the place you belonged. The gap between cultural expectation of roots and the reality that some roots never went deep. The gap between performing nostalgia and feeling it. And perhaps the most important truth is this: most people who don't miss their hometown aren't rejecting their past. They're just refusing to romanticize a reality that wasn't romantic. They're not ungrateful. They're just honest about what that place gave them and what it didn't. The nostalgia is absent. The guilt is real, but the deficiency it's pointing to is not. Some people make peace with this slowly, not through one revelation, but through accumulated acceptance. They stop apologizing for not missing it. They recognize that the people who judge them for leaving probably never felt trapped the way they did. They learn that hometown loyalty isn't moral superiority, it's just geographic luck. And in those moments of recognition, something loosens. The expectation that you should feel something you don't. The performance of attachment that was never real. The belief that everyone belongs somewhere, and if you don't belong there, you're broken. It doesn't mean the questions disappear entirely. There will still be moments at family gatherings when someone says, "Remember," and you don't. Not really. Not with warmth. There will still be assumptions that you'll come home eventually from people who can't imagine not wanting to. There will still be quiet judgment about your choice to stay away. That's okay. That's not your failure. That's their inability to understand a different way of being. And recognizing that difference changes everything. Not overnight, not at any milestone, but slowly, gradually, in ways that finally feel honest, not rooted, just free, living where you choose rather than where you started, which is a completely valid way to be human, the only way some people can be human, the only way some people ever will be human. You're not ungrateful, you're not cold, you're not broken, you're human, living with honesty instead of obligation, building home instead of inheriting it, creating belonging instead of assuming it comes with geography, and that's enough